So, see, you have to understand Ishrat's case in the context of what was happening in Gujarat post 2002. Now, this newly elected Modi government is installed in the aftermath of this horrible communal orgy of 2002, and suddenly you see a number of so-called assassins entering Gujarat to assassinate Narendra Modi, and one by one there are a series of encounter killings of these so-called assassins, and simultaneously there are a number of conspiracy cases, the ISI case, the DCB case, which are known as the DCB-6 case and the ISI case, again showing that there were these huge conspiracies of Islamic militants to kill Narendra Modi. Now, obviously, all of this had the effect of burnishing his image, of producing this image of this Hindu Hriday Samrat who was at the target of these Islamic militants who wanted to eliminate him. But one by one, we see that at that time, many of these people were then, of course, people like Vanzara and Singhal and so on, were then jailed later on for manufacturing these encounter killings, for faking these killings, which were basically cold-blooded executions. Now, you had the Sohrabuddin case, you had the Sadiq Jamal case, you had the Tulsi Prajapati case, you had Ishrat Jahan case, from 2002 till 2006 and 7. Now, Ishrat was killed in a similar encounter. She was said to be, Lashkar-e-Taiba militant who was on her way along with her accomplices to assassinate Narendra Modi. But if you look at the way in which, if you look at the investigations done first by the magisterial inquiry committee, which is known as the Tamang report, and thereafter the High Court appointed special investigative team, the SIT, and thereafter the CBI, which came in after the SIT submitted its report. Now, all three of these have clearly established that Ishrat was neither a terrorist, nor was she on her way to kill Narendra Modi, nor part of any conspiracy to kill him. On the other hand, what these have established through evidence is the fact that she was killed in cold blood by these very cynical and manipulative police officers of the Gujarat police. Now, this case, the Tamang report, then the SIT, and then the CBI investigating, and the CBI then filed a charge sheet in that case based on the 161 and 164 statements of very senior police officers, which kind of established the linkages between not only the highest police officers but also the highest political authority in the state. Now, and as you know, Amit Shah went to jail in the Sohrabuddin encounter case but was later discharged of the case. Now, the case has been charge sheeted, right? This case will go on. It's a criminal trial which will go on. On the other hand, you have then the tragedy of Bombay in 2008, which is commonly referred to as 2611, in which one of the main accused persons is David Headley. Now, David Headley, please remember, has been charged of being the main conspirator. He is supposed to have done the recce of all the places, of all the locations where these blasts and these the terrorists arrived and carried out their operations. Now, this man has been granted pardon by the Indian state.
David Headley.
David Headley. He's and in complete violation of the law of the land, which says that for somebody to be granted pardon, that person has to be in the custody of the police, right? Now, here is a man who is, God knows whether a double agent or a triple agent or a quadruple agent. He has worked for FBI, he's worked for Lashkar-e-Taiba, he's worked for God knows how many agencies, and who's built his entire career on lying, right? And on manufacturing things. Now, he has been granted pardon. He's not in your custody. He's sitting in America with his lawyers, and he's recording his statement through a satellite uplink, right? So the Indian investigators have no control over him, as so to speak, and he's supposed to be testifying in a 2611 inquiry. And the main accused is somebody else. Ishrat Jahan has nothing to do with the 2611 case. She was killed long before this tragedy of 2611 happened, right? So now this David Headley is being cross-examined in court by public prosecutor, special public prosecutor, Mr. Ujjwal Nikam, who has been on record to say that he lied earlier about Kasab asking for biryani, so that he could create hysteria against Kasab and could expedite his execution. Now, here is David Headley, who's a double agent, who's switched between different identities for his professional purposes. Here is a public prosecutor who's been very economical with the truth, right? And there is a cross-examination that takes place between,
the same public prosecutor who
yes,
lied.
Nikam then cross-examines Headley over satellite uplink, right? And then he asks him, just look at the way, and David Headley is supposed to be answering questions about 2611, right? And Nikam is supposed to be asking him questions about 2611. Now, Nikam asks him, do you know of female suicide bombers in Lashkar-e-Taiba? He says, no. Then he gives him some options. Then he says, but was there a women's wing of Lashkar-e-Taiba? He says, yes. Who headed it? This one headed it. Were there any female suicide bombers? I don't know. Let me give you some options. Why don't I give you some options? X, Y, Z, Ishrat Jahan. He says, oh, Ishrat Jahan. Right? And what do we have next? We have the present government raving and ranting that Headley has proved that Ishrat was a terrorist. So all this, prosecution, of police officers, and all these aspersions being cast on the then Chief Minister and the then Home Minister and so on was all invalid and a political conspiracy, and so therefore we should now start believing Headley. Right? And it is in these circumstances. And what do? We have, the nation wants to know, screaming and shouting at night, saying, oh, Headley says Ishrat was a terrorist. But mind you, look at every single piece of evidence so far collected. And that's a separate trial. That what Headley says has no legal bearing on how the trial for the murder of Ishrat Jahan will play out. Right? So this is what we have. And then you have, former IB officers who were being suspected of being involved in the murder of Ishrat Jahan, then crying, copiously on television screen, saying, now, we've been proved right by this pathological, psychopathic liar, right? So that's what's happening, and that's what's playing out now. But the point is, what the moot question here is, can the state execute people in cold blood like they did Ishrat Jahan? And that question remains, and that trial remains, regardless of how much hysteria and hype they create around Headley's so-called revelations. That is not going to change how the trial for Ishrat will proceed.
So that letter which Chidambaram that's the
affidavit. That's another thing that's being played out. They say that there was the first affidavit filed by the Ministry of Home Affairs, and that was then withdrawn. Whereas the first affidavit said that Ishrat was, a terrorist. The second affidavit said that we don't know about her links at all to Lashkar. But if you look at the first affidavit, and anybody can Google, just Google for Home Ministry affidavit, Ishrat Jahan, and so on, and you will get that affidavit. It's a PDF file floating around the internet. You will find, if you look at that affidavit doesn't say that there is any intelligence input which says that Ishrat was a Lashkar operative. It says that this newspaper says, quoting that newspaper or that Lashkar website or something. It's all hearsay. Okay. And based on news reports. There is nothing of the intelligence input in that affidavit. So in any case, that affidavit wouldn't have stood the test of legality.